The alarm on the ship woke me before the voice did. Red light spilled across the observation dome, and my hands were shaking before I even understood why. I am Elena, a translator, and 3 seconds earlier I had been asleep in a chair on an alien vessel called the Void's Fang, floating somewhere above my own planet. Now every screen around me was blinking with a single word repeated in 3 languages, one of them mine. Compliance action initiated. I did not know yet what those 2 words meant. I would know within the hour, and I would spend the rest of my life explaining it to people who were not there. 7 months earlier, the Krillthal had arrived in the sky above Earth without asking permission, the way a landlord arrives at a house he already believes he owns. Their ships did not look like machines. They looked grown, like something scraped out of a shell, gray and ribbed and silent. Governments panicked. Scientists argued. And somehow, through a chain of decisions I still do not fully understand, I ended up chosen to speak to them, because I had spent my whole career studying how strangers misunderstand each other, and someone decided that skill might matter now more than ever. The ambassador's name was Skarn. He had too many eyes and a voice that clicked when he breathed, and for months he had been almost gentle with me, in the way a large animal is gentle with something it does not consider a threat. On the night the alarm went off, I had just finished another meeting with him. He had spent an hour explaining, calmly, and without any anger at all, why his people considered humanity harmless. You have soft skin, he told me. No claws, no armor. Your bodies break easily, and your children take years to grow. In every measurement that matters to us, your species is not a predator. It is a resource. I remember nodding, not because I agreed, but because arguing with him felt useless, like arguing with weather. I asked him one question before the meeting ended, a question that would matter more than either of us understood at the time. Have you studied what happens after our conflicts end? I asked him, not just the conflicts themselves. He said no. He said it did not matter. He said the outcome was already decided, because outcome always followed shape, and our shape was small and fragile and slow. Then the alarm went off, and I learned exactly how wrong shape can be as a way of measuring a person. The corridor outside the observation dome was full of movement, Krillthal crew rushing past me without a single glance in my direction, because to them I was furniture that happened to speak. A soldier named Daniel, one of the 2 human liaisons stationed permanently on the ship, grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a maintenance alcove before I could ask a single question. There was another liaison with us, a young engineer named Pretty, who had been assigned to monitor the ship's power systems as part of the original trade agreement. She was already crouched near a small console, watching numbers scroll faster than I could read them. They're pulling power from every non-essential system, she whispered, without looking up. Life support in the guest quarters, communication buffers, even the lighting in half the lower decks. That only happens when a ship is preparing for something it expects to take losses. Daniel asked her how long we had before the fleet actually moved, and she shook her head slowly, still watching the numbers. Not long, she said. Maybe an hour, maybe less. Whatever this is, they are not planning to wait for daylight down there. They're moving the whole fleet into position, he said, his voice low and fast. Compliance action. That's their term for what happens when a species refuses a treaty they never actually offered us. It means they're not here to talk anymore. I asked him what we were supposed to do. Nothing, he said. That's the point. We're supposed to sit here and watch while they teach the rest of you a lesson. That's what compliance looks like from up here. I did not sit and watch. I want that on record, because for years afterward people asked me if I had been afraid, and the honest answer is that fear arrived so fast it left no room for anything except motion. I found a communication terminal, meant for diplomatic use only, and I broke every rule I had been given about its purpose, and I sent one short message down to the surface, addressed to the only contact I still had clearance to reach, a woman named Priya who worked 3 levels below the Joint Command Center in Colorado. They are moving the fleet, I wrote. This is not a drill, this is not a warning. This is the real thing, and it is happening now. I did not know if the message would arrive in time. I did not know if it would arrive at all. What I did know, watching the Krillthal crew organize with total confidence around me, was that they believed this would be simple. They believed we would break the way glass breaks, quickly and without resistance, and that belief was about to be tested against something they had never bothered to study. Down on the surface, Priya received my message at 11 minutes past 2 in the morning, according to the records that were declassified years later. She woke a duty officer. The duty officer woke a general. The general did not wait for confirmation, because the entire defense structure of the planet had been built, quietly and for decades, around a single principle nobody had ever wanted to say out loud. If it ever comes, it will come without warning, so prepare as if warning will never arrive. That principle saved millions of lives in the next 9 days. I later learned, from records shared long after the fighting ended, exactly how that single message traveled once it reached the ground. The general who received the warning did not call a meeting. He did not wait for a committee to approve a response. He picked up a direct line that had been installed decades earlier for exactly one purpose. A line meant to connect a handful of officers across different countries who had quietly agreed, years before, that any true warning from orbit deserved instant action rather than careful discussion. Within 4 minutes, 3 separate defense networks on 3 separate continents had shifted into their highest state of readiness, without a single public announcement, without a single siren sounding in any city. People kept sleeping. Traffic lights kept changing. Nobody on the surface knew anything unusual was happening, and that quiet was intentional, because panic spreads faster than preparation, and preparation was the only thing that mattered in those first few minutes. A woman named Grace, an officer stationed at one of the coastal monitoring stations, told me much later that she had been the one to confirm the first visual contact with the descending fleet, hours before any of it became public knowledge. We had trained for this exact scenario so many times that it almost felt unreal when it actually happened, she said, not frightening in the moment, just familiar, like running through a drill we had somehow already memorized without ever admitting we believed we would need it. I want to describe what happened next carefully, because the version most people know now is simplified into something almost like a legend, and legends lose the details that actually mattered. The Krillthal fleet moved first toward the orbital stations, 3 research platforms and 1 communication relay, expecting no resistance because these were civilian structures with no weapons attached. What they found instead was a defense network built from decades of quiet paranoia, sensors and countermeasures installed not because anyone expected an alien fleet specifically, but because humanity had learned, over and over across its own history, that peace is not a condition you receive. It is a structure you build and maintain, the same way you maintain a bridge, expecting weight it may never have to carry. The relay station did not surrender. It did not fight in any dramatic way either. It simply executed a defense protocol that had been rehearsed 1,000 times in simulation, rerouting power, sealing sections, buying time while sending a continuous stream of data toward the surface, mapping every ship in the approaching fleet with a precision the Krillthal had not expected from a species they considered too primitive to notice being studied back. Skarn later told me, in the strange quiet after everything ended, that this single moment confused his commanders more than anything else in the entire war. Not the strength of our resistance, the fact that we had already been watching them the whole time, cataloging their formations, learning their patterns, while pretending, in every meeting, to be simply curious guests. "You never told us you were counting," he said. "You never asked," I told him. The 9 days that followed were not 9 days of constant motion. They were long stretches of waiting broken by sudden, sharp moments of decision, and it was in those moments that the shape of the war became clear. The Krillthal fought as a single confident force, moving in wide formations meant to overwhelm through presence alone, because in 11,000 years of expansion, presence alone had usually been enough. Humanity did not fight as a single force. We fought as thousands of smaller decisions made independently, and then joined together at the last possible second, submarines surfacing in places no orbital scan had flagged as significant, defense satellites long thought outdated activating in sequences that had been quietly updated every year since their launch, communication networks built with so much redundancy that cutting one line did nothing except reveal 3 others nobody outside a small circle of engineers even knew existed. I was not part of any of those decisions. I stayed where I was, translating, listening, watching Skarn's confidence erode one report at a time. On the 3rd day he asked me directly why our defense felt less like an army and more like an idea that refused to stop appearing in new places. I told him the truth, because by then there was no reason to hide it. "We do not have one army," I said. "We have every generation that came before this one, still speaking through what they built." He did not understand that answer immediately. I am not sure he ever fully did. On the 4th day, something happened that Skarn later admitted had troubled him more than any single loss on the battlefield. A small Krillthal vessel, sent to scout a coastal region that their sensors had flagged as lightly defended, approached low over open water expecting no resistance at all. Instead, it was met by a response so precisely timed that its commander reported, in a message intercepted afterward, that the coordinates of his own ship had somehow been known before he arrived at them. That vessel was forced to retreat without completing its mission, undamaged but deeply shaken, and its commander spent the following hours trying to explain to his superiors how a coastline with no visible defenses had still managed to predict his exact position. The truth was simple, though it took the Krillthal a long time to accept it. The coastline had been mapped, studied, and quietly defended for generations, long before any alien fleet had ever entered our sky, because humanity had never fully trusted the idea that any border, on land or in orbit, could be considered permanently safe. By the sixth day, the Krillthal had lost enough ships that their formations, once wide and confident, had drawn inward into something closer to a defensive shape, and I remember the exact moment their tone shifted, because it happened in a single sentence from their fleet commander, a voice I had never heard speak directly to me before. "Explain your species," the commander said, through Skarn, because he refused to address me without a translator even now. "Explain how something with no claws does this." I told him what I had told Skarn days earlier, and I meant every word of it. "We were never predators by shape," I said. "We survived as prey for most of our history, hunted by animals stronger and faster than we were. And the only reason we still exist is that we stopped relying on shape and started relying on memory. Every mistake we ever made, we wrote down. Every death we ever suffered, we studied, so it would not happen the same way twice. You built an empire on the idea that strength decides outcome. We built a civilization on the idea that memory decides outcome, and memory does not weaken with age, it grows." The commander did not respond to that for a long time. When he finally spoke again, it was not to me. It was an order to withdraw the forward ships, the first clear sign that the compliance action, as they had called it, was no longer proceeding according to any plan they understood. On the 9th day, Skarn requested a private conversation, away from his commanders, away from any official record. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see, with my own eyes, what defeat looked like on a species that had never needed the word before. He looked smaller somehow, though nothing about his body had changed. His voice, usually sharp and certain, came out slow. "Every measurement we used said you were harmless," he said. "Soft skin, no natural defenses, slow to reproduce. We do not understand what we missed. You measured what we are born with," I told him. "You never measured what we build with it." "What are you then?" he asked, and I could hear, even through the translation software, that the question was sincere. "If you are not predators, and you were never truly prey, what does that make you?" I thought about that question for a long moment before answering, because I wanted the answer to be true, not comforting. "We are the species that refused to stay prey," I said. "Not because our bodies changed, but because we learned to carry every lesson forward, every single time, without exception, for longer than any predator has ever bothered to remember anything at all." He had no category for that answer. I do not think his people have found one since. The ceasefire that followed was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost businesslike. The Krillthal fleet withdrawing to a distance considered neutral, under the very treaty framework they had originally offered us as a formality, back when they believed we would accept it without question. Negotiations that followed were led by people far more qualified than me, though I remained in the room for most of them, translating not just words but intentions, watching a species built entirely on the logic of strength try to understand a species built on the logic of never forgetting. I returned to the surface 11 days after the alarm first woke me, and the first thing I noticed, stepping off the transport, was how ordinary everything looked. Streets still full of morning traffic, children still walking to school, a woman selling coffee from a small stand near the landing zone, completely unaware that the shape of the galaxy around her had just shifted in ways she would probably never fully learn about. I found Priya later that same week, the woman whose message had started the entire chain of decisions that saved so many lives before the fighting had even properly begun. She looked exhausted in the particular way that comes from holding something enormous quietly, without ever being thanked for it publicly. "Did you know," I asked her, "that a message sent at 11 minutes past 2 in the morning would end up mattering this much?" She shook her head. "I just did my job," she said. "Someone built a system that trusted people to act fast on incomplete information, and I trusted it back. That's the whole story. Nothing more dramatic than that." I have thought about her answer many times since then, because I believe it is the truest thing anyone said to me in the entire 9 days. Nothing about our victory came from a single dramatic act. It came from thousands of ordinary people trusting systems that other ordinary people had built decades earlier, out of nothing more special than the stubborn belief that danger might arrive without warning, and preparation was worth the effort, even if it never got used. Months later, once the formal treaty had been signed and the Krillthal fleet had withdrawn to a distance both sides considered safe, Skarn requested one final meeting with me, informal, without commanders or recorders present. We sat together in a small room aboard a shuttle meant for neutral diplomatic exchanges, and for the first time since I had met him, he did not sound like an ambassador at all. He sounded like someone trying honestly to understand something that had shaken the foundation of everything he believed. "I have read your history now," he said. "All of it, as much as your archives allowed us access to. I understand the wars. I understand the losses. What I do not understand is why a species that suffered so much chose to remember instead of simply becoming harder, the way we became harder after our own conflicts." I told him that hardness fades, but memory, properly kept, does not. A hard shell can still be broken by something harder. A lesson, once carried forward honestly, protects every generation after it, even generations who never faced the original danger themselves. He asked me, finally, what word my people would choose, if not predator, and not prey, to describe what we actually were. I did not have a perfect answer for him then, and I am not certain I have one now, years later, writing this account because historians asked me to put the whole experience into words for people who were not there, and deserve to understand what almost happened above their heads while they slept. The closest answer I have found is this: we are the species that turned every wound into instruction. We are the species that refused to let danger surprise us twice. We did not become predators by shape, and we were never truly prey by nature. We became something else entirely, something built slowly across thousands of generations, something no empire built purely on strength had ever thought to prepare for, because strength forgets, and we never did. That is the story of the 9 days, told as honestly as I can tell it, by someone who was there for the alarm, the fear, the long silences, and the quiet, ordinary courage of people who trusted systems they had never seen tested, and were proven right when it mattered most. I still think, sometimes, about the woman selling coffee near the landing zone on the day I returned to the surface, unaware of how close her ordinary morning had come to ending very differently. I think about Priya, still exhausted from a decision she described as nothing more than doing her job. I think about Grace, standing quietly at her monitoring station, and Pretty, watching numbers scroll across a console on a ship that was never truly hers. None of them asked to become part of something larger than themselves. They simply did the small, careful work in front of them, and that work, multiplied across an entire species, became something no fleet built purely on strength had ever prepared to face. Skarn asked me once, in that final quiet meeting, whether I believed another species could ever learn to do what we had done. I told him I did not know, because the answer depends on something that cannot be copied quickly. It depends on choosing, generation after generation, to remember rather than forget, to prepare rather than assume safety, and to trust that the people who come after will finish the work that the people before them started. That choice, repeated quietly for thousands of years, was the only weapon we ever truly needed.